Lots to discuss today on the In All Kinds of Weather forecast. Offensive line coach Darnell Stapleton leaves for the NFL. Strength and conditioning coach Craig Fitzgerald leaves for Boston College. A four-star offensive line commits, and more. We'll get caught up on everything that's happened in the last 2.5 weeks, and we'll talk about how the month of February has served as a rude wake-up call for where things stand for the Gator football program, and more importantly, how the Gators can bounce back and overcome the less than ideal position they are currently in. This is the In All Kinds of Weather forecast. Welcome back to the In All Kinds of Weather forecast. I am your host, Neil Schulman. We are starting to get a lot more active on YouTube, which means more shows are coming. So if you haven't already done so, please be sure to smash that subscribe button down below, hit that like button, and be sure to comment your thoughts on what we're discussing today below. And what we're discussing today is a lot, because since we last talked football on here, offensive line coach Darnell Stapleton has left for the NFL. Strength and conditioning coach Craig Fitzgerald has left for Boston College. Tyler Miles has replaced him in that role. Florida also brought back Jesse Ackerman to help him. Four-star offensive lineman Peyton Joseph has committed to Florida, and a really nice NIL moment, DeAndre Robinson buying his mom a house with his NIL money. All that, and we'll take a look at the bigger picture of everything Florida Gator football related today. We'll get to all that in a second. But first, though, we got to shout out our merch store. That slick new alligator logo that pays homage to all your favorite moments in Gator history is available on merch. You can get it all by going to inallkindsofweather.com/merch. As you can see, we've got polos, we've got t-shirts, we've got workout tees, we've got sweatshirts, we've got pint glasses. You can see one right here, using this for my little water rehydration throughout the show today. We've got tumblers, we've got koozies on here, we've got pretty much anything you can think of. You name it, we've got it on some kind of merch. So go to inallkindsofweather.com/merch to get yours today. All right, first, Darnell Stapleton leaving Florida for a job on the Washington Commanders staff in the NFL. Tough, because I do think highly of Stapleton. I don't know that he really helped situations last year. As Chris and I both said all last year, the two offensive line coach approach just didn't work. Florida, brace yourselves for this, allowed a staggering 3.25 sacks per game last year. 3.25 sacks per game allowed last year by this Florida offensive line. That is good for 114th in the 130 team FBS. Clearly not working to have two offensive line coaches, especially at the expense of another potential on-field position. So something had to change. So what does Florida do now that the change has already happened for Napier? Well, the situation doesn't seem to have any finality to it, but as of now, we are hearing that yes, there's still an opening on the staff, and that Napier is planning to fill it with another offensive line coach. So Florida will again have two offensive line coaches in 2024. That is not final. There has not been a hire announced, but that is where things appear to be headed right now. Of course, not ideal, because as we've said for over a year now, among other problems with this, one of the problems is that it takes away an on-field staff spot from somewhere else that you might really need it. Like, for example, special teams, which was simply not very good. In fact, I would even call it a disaster the last couple of years. You got to wonder if having an on-field special teams coach stops the issue of two guys running onto this field with the same jersey number, like it happened against Utah, or the substitution fiasco against Arkansas. But this is just where Billy Napier appears to be leaning, and well, he is the head coach, for better or worse. This is his funeral. So that is that. Then there is the issue that I think best encapsulates where the Florida program is right now. Craig Fitzgerald, deemed to be a big-time hire to oversee the strength and conditioning program for Florida, leaving after 1 month on the job for the same role at Boston College. And here's where it starts to get a little scary. It's going to sound bad, and I think that it should, because the situation in reality is not great, but I do not think it is final. So again, what I'm going to say does sound bleak, but it is not going to be easy, but it is reversible. So let's go into it with that mindset that it's not a good situation. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't sound good. It doesn't look good. It doesn't make us really think anything good about the overall direction of the program, but it is reversible. And I do think that Napier is starting to make some moves, not all, but some moves that are going to be shifting this in a positive direction. Anyway, I understand that Craig Fitzgerald has a relationship with Bill O'Brien, who's the head coach at Boston College. I get it. I understand that he wants to be with his good friend. I understand simply wanting to coach on the same staff as your friend, regardless of the name of the school. I understand that. Fact of the matter is, you don't see Georgia assistants leaving for the exact same job at Boston College. You don't see assistants at Alabama leaving their jobs in Tuscaloosa for the same exact job at Boston College. You don't see assistants at Texas or at Oklahoma or at LSU leaving for the exact same job in Boston College or a Syracuse or an Illinois or a Kansas State or a South Carolina. You don't see them do that. You don't see coaches move across the country like that for the exact same job from a school of the caliber of Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma, etc., to a school like Boston College. Now, for a promotion, like, for example, if BC were to double the salary, yeah, sure. Of course, they'd leave then. If you're going to talk about poaching a linebackers coach for a coordinator spot, of course, you'd leave Tuscaloosa or Athens or Austin, Texas for Boston in a heartbeat. Of course you would. That's how Florida actually got Austin Armstrong away from Alabama. He was the LB coach there. Florida made him his defensive coordinator. So yeah, it's no brainer. He's taking a step up. So in that situation, yes, coaches do leave the programs like Alabama and Georgia and Texas for Boston College. You don't see coaches leaving those types of schools for the exact same role at a lesser program. Even if they have a relationship with the head coach there, they just don't do that unless there is a significant increase in salary, which does not seem to be the case for Fitzgerald. And that right now is a pretty good measuring stick of where Florida is as a program. And now I hate to go back to this, but we're starting to see the chickens come home to roost after some of the decisions Billy Napier made the last couple of seasons. We're starting to see the ripple effect consequences of those losses the last couple of years. So for fans who want to say, you can't blame Napier for this, Fitzgerald is just following his buddy. Yeah, in a literal sense, you're absolutely correct. But in another way, it is Napier's fault because Napier lost that game to Vanderbilt in 2022. He thought he could have an off-field analyst run the special teams unit. Jason Marshall commits the cardinal sin of trying to field a punt in his own end zone. Florida loses. Florida lost that game to FSU 2 years in a row that Florida had that game in their grasp, and Napier blew it. First in 2022 by abandoning a running game that FSU could not stop in the second half and having Anthony Richardson throw 3 straight passes on back-to-back possessions despite bad conditions on the field and despite his receiver unit being down to Ricky Pearsall and a skeleton crew. Then in 2023, with one of the stupidest trick plays I've ever seen in my life, where he maneuvers the offensive line all over to the sidelines and has the convoy of blockers set up for Trey Wilson. But first, the ball is designed to get redirected right to the spot where his offensive line just abandoned. Like, you did it. You fooled FSU. You have their defensive line blitzing against air while your offensive line is blocking against air with a receiver behind them, and he's going to probably score. But you insist on bringing the ball right back to where the opponent is coming through. Like, I don't know how this wasn't figured out in practice when this play was in beta testing, but for that to be rolled out in the game was a calamity and on Billy Napier's head. It was his fault. So, again, and Florida, we can go on and on about this. Florida lost that game to Kentucky 2 years in a row. First with some pretty dumb decisions to go for it on 4th down in his own territory in 2022, and then again in 2023 because it came time to pay the bill for subpar offensive line recruiting, both in high school and the portal, despite having 2 offensive line coaches. And Napier lost those games to Utah and Arkansas in 2023 because first, there's nobody to double check that every player has a unique jersey number on. And then because the special team sprints back on the field before it should have, which triggers an illegal substitution penalty, which pushes the game-winning field goal attempt back 5 yards, which missed. And Florida then lost in overtime. Should have done something about that in 2022. Napier didn't do it. So, like I said, in the pre-2023 offseason, after a terrible 2022 season of special teams, Billy, you're the head coach. You do have power that the rest of us don't. You can do what you want, but if you willfully choose to continue on the same trajectory and things don't get better, you're going to pay for it. And now we see exactly that. That is why Trevor Etienne left Florida. He wants to win. That's why he's at Georgia. Yeah, sure. You can say it's a sickening world where there's no loyalty to the logo anymore, and you just have to you just have to watch guys play for their rival with the snap of a finger and a couple signed papers. I hate that. But Napier could have avoided that. If Florida wins those games that Napier goes out of his way to lose, like if Florida's 9-3 in 2022, and then he's 9-3 again in 2023, Etienne doesn't leave. Prince Umanielen doesn't leave. Xavier Filsame doesn't decommit and flip to Texas. And your strength and conditioning coach doesn't leave for Boston College. He doesn't leave for a lesser program. But these things all happen because, right or wrong, these people who left Florida feel in some cases that Florida is kind of a sinking ship and they want to go somewhere else that's going to have more stability. Or in Etienne's case, he just wants to win because he knows he's going to go pro after this upcoming year anyway. He wants to win something in his final year of college. But for the rest of them, they worry about Napier's stability. And look, I'm not saying Napier is guaranteed to fail at Florida. He could be. It's very possible. And in fact, I would probably say it's more likely than not after starting 11-14, but that's not written in stone. He can course correct here. But what I am saying is that the people who feel as though winning is not an achievable goal at Florida and depart the program feel that they're better suited to take their talents elsewhere. And here is where I will say that I am the first to admit that Florida has a very demanding fan base. Some of that is highly unrealistic. Some of it is based on what my dad calls manifest destiny, meaning that we feel entitled to win and other teams just exist for us to beat up on. Like it's a video game. They just exist because they have to exist, and that we're entitled to win everything. Some of it's based on the fact that Florida has 3 national titles in the last 30 years, and in fact, a very legitimate case at a 4th national title in 1984. Now, there are some individual Florida fans out there, I will get through this part quickly. Got to say it. There are some boneheaded Florida fans out there who legitimately wish harm upon players and coaches. So to anybody who wants to come back with that, let me say I make no excuses for that. I hate those people too. But there's a very clear distinction between that and simply saying, hey, you know what? This is the history of Gator football. We've got 3 national titles in the last 30 years. This is what Napier has done. These two things don't match up. We strive to compete for titles at Florida. We'll give you a few years to do it. But if you don't, you're gone. That's just how it works. And that's always how it works. Remember, we fired Ron Zook for doing better than Napier is doing now. And we paid him a lot less. Even if you adjust their salaries for inflation, we paid Zook a lot less. So look, if you're one of those fans who wants to put the burden on the rest of the fan base for pointing this all out and quote unquote turning up the heat or bringing about the noise in the system, as Ron Zook would say, my response is very simple. Florida has a standard of excellence. Napier's various decisions, like his decision to go ahead with an off-field analyst in Chris Couch as a special teams for not 1, but 2 years. The various play calls he's rolled out, like coming to mind immediately are the 4th down shovel pass to Dante Zanders against Utah last year, the FSU trick play, the general lack of urgency he showed down 3 scores against Kentucky, in the FSU game 2 years ago too. All these decisions that Napier has made have held Florida back from obtaining that excellence. It's because of those decisions that Florida is now 11-14 since Napier took over and why he is on the hot seat. That's just a fact. Another fact, by the way, is, get ready for this, Napier is the first coach since just after World War II to have a losing season in each of his first 2 seasons at Florida. Charlie Pell did have a worse overall record in his first 2 seasons, but he did not have 2 losing seasons back to back. Just think about that for a second. No, the last Gator coach to have back-to-back losing seasons to begin his tenure at Florida was Raymond Wolf in 1946 and 1947. He was 0-9 his first year. He was 4-5-1 his second year. And Raymond Wolf, by the way, also the last time a Florida Gator coach concluded his tenure in Gainesville with a losing record, something Billy Napier is in grave jeopardy of doing. 11-14 as of right now, a brutal schedule this upcoming year. That was 75 years ago. He left Florida in 1949. Never since then, in the last 3/4 of a century, has a full-time Florida coach, meaning not interim, not just coaching for a bowl game, but a full-time, multi-year Florida coach finished his tenure with a losing record. That is the history that Billy Napier is up against right now. And that's the history he is in danger of matching. So the next time that anybody out there wants to accuse the Florida fan base of being toxic, just remember that. Yes, I know, in all kinds of weather, we will all stick together for Florida. That is the cornerstone of this in all kinds of weather brand. It is something I believe we should all live our lives by as Gator fans. And not Gator related, by the way. We should all stick by those people who mean the most to us, despite, any good or bad that may come about. But nothing in that song says that we have to lower expectations. In all kinds of weather, it means we'll all stick together for Florida. It doesn't say we'll all stick together to lower the bar of what is acceptable, which, by the way, is supremely disrespectful to guys like Spurrier and Urban and even Dan Mullen, by the way, who helped raise or maintain that bar. We will not all stick together to clap like trained seals whenever our head football coach does something objectively stupid that defies common sense and reason. And we're not supposed to all stick together to turn a blind eye to what we can all clearly see isn't working. We stick together for Florida. We stick together for Florida, for what is best for the University of Florida Gator football program. And while we may disagree on what is indeed best for Florida, as Gator fans, whether you agree with me here or not, we all have to come together and agree on a starting point. And that starting point is that, yes, we do indeed all want what is best for Florida. We may have different ideas on what is best for Florida, but we have to all start at this common point that we all want what's best for the Gator program. So I've just laid out a pretty strong argument against Billy Napier right now. And I think I should say, after I've said all of that, I like Billy Napier. I really do. I really want Napier to work out here. I like his emphasis on recruiting. I like his results in recruiting, getting guys like DJ Lagway and Miles Graham and Aaron Childs and LJ McCray, I think, are all huge. Jerry Hawkins, another guy I think that can be very, very, very productive for Florida. I think he is a genuinely good person who wants to do the right thing on and off the field. I think he does want to do things the right way, both on and off the field for Florida. And that's all great. That all does count. It does mean something for me. But as someone who does like him, I am frustrated with him right now. And the fact of the matter is he has no one to blame but himself for this position that he's in right now, because Napier is the one who made the boneheaded play calls that cost Florida games in 2022. Napier is the one who appointed an off-field analyst to coach the special teams in 2022. And Napier is the one who refused to change either of those things for 2023 after a laundry list of evidence that change was needed, which means that when those things continue to cost Florida more wins in 2023, he is the one who ultimately shouldered that blame. And to reiterate, because Florida lost those games that they lost, the program was deemed less desirable for recruits, current players, and staffers. That's on Napier. That's Napier's fault. The burden is not on the fan base to be all sunshine and rainbows. It's not the fans' responsibility to talk more sweetly about this program on social media. Yes, of course, there are limits. Just because you can say whatever you want doesn't mean you should. I would encourage fans to not be venomous about it. Don't, spam recruits with vitriol. And as we say on this show, keep it respectful. But when you're discussing the Florida Gators, keep it real. Keep it respectful, but keep it real. That doesn't mean you tweet it out recruits. It doesn't mean you DM it to recruits. But when you're talking about the Gators on a public timeline like Twitter or on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it may be, you're entitled to say, you know what? This is what Florida's produced in the past. This is what Florida's producing now. There's a disconnect here. Florida's not living up to the standard, and we have a right to demand that they do that. We have a right to demand that Florida does live up to the standard. So the facts and data that I just rolled out are one example of keeping it real. There are different ways you can do that. Different fans have different opinions. They have different ways of coming to different conclusions. But however you do it, keep it respectful, but keep it real. Keeping it real means this is the situation Napier has created for himself. Napier has got himself into the mess, and now he has to get himself out of it. So that's that's the bleak part of it. That's the negative Neil side of this. Coming around to the other side, we do have other things to talk about today. There has been more there have been more developments since Craig Fitzgerald left Florida. I think a couple of them have been corrective things that have happened. Florida players lobbying for Tyler Miles, the director of player athletic development, to take over for Craig Fitzgerald. Napier listened. I thought that was very good because no, you don't want inmates running the asylum type of situation, but continuity is a good thing, especially when your strength coach leaves so suddenly mid-off season. And players say that nothing has changed, that the routines, the regimens are exactly the same with Tyler Miles as they were with Craig Fitzgerald, and that's a good thing. Florida also bringing in Jesse Ackerman, who was previously on staff from 2012 to 2015 under Will Muschamp, and then for a year under Jim McElwain. He has a wealth of experience in bodybuilding. And for all that I just said about how bleak of a picture things are right now of the reality for the Florida Gators being so dark and gray, this is why I say it's repairable. I think it is redeemable, because I happen to think that these two guys, Miles and Ackerman, make a great team. At least they appear to on paper. But I mean, look at Ackerman's resume. He is the more senior of the two. And among others, he has worked with the Atlanta Falcons. He has worked with the U.S. Army. He has worked with the Texas Longhorns, a previous stop at University of Florida, as I talked about a second ago. And he has 2 master's degrees in clinical mental health counseling and exercise science. Those two are great for a special teams coach to have. He has several certifications, including certified strength and conditioning specialist, corrective exercise specialization, performance enhancement specialist. That is all great. I am very happy with that. As someone who just laid into Napier, as someone who just laid into the current state of the program, that's all great. And for as terrible as it was to lose Fitzgerald a month after he started, both from a perception standpoint and a lack of continuity standpoint, for as grim of a reality as that looked to be for the program, that is an excellent resume that Florida now has on its staff at the University of Florida to oversee an area that was a pretty glaring weakness last couple of years. Strength and conditioning just wasn't there. Florida in the fourth quarter of games just was not where it should have been. And Florida, I think, is doing everything they can to possibly remedy that situation. So between the resume of Ackerman and the continuity of Miles overseeing the same regimens, I think that Florida did rebound pretty nicely from that predicament. And I think that Napier deserves credit for that because, yes, we're going to have to see how Florida looks in the fourth quarter of games before we can truly judge anything. But certainly on paper, this looks to be a good move with the information we currently have in our hands. Also, worth noting, Florida has gotten a commitment from 4-star offensive lineman Peyton Joseph since our last show, a very athletic lineman from Warner Robins, Georgia, who can move very, very well for an interior lineman. He's 6'4", 305, Also had offers from FSU, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, Oregon, LSU, Tennessee, Miami, Michigan, Colorado, et cetera, et cetera. A very nice head-to-head win for Florida, specifically over Tennessee and LSU. Florida does have a lot of work to do in the 2025 class. They've only got 4 commits now with Peyton Joseph, but if Napier is going to be here for the long haul, he's got to start. He's got to start landing the top guys on the offensive line. And for all the flack that he and Rob Sale get for their offensive line recruiting, this is a big one. Give them some credit. They did that right here, and that's great. And the last thing we're going to talk about today, the heartwarming story that most of us have probably already seen by now, but Florida defensive line signee DeAndre Robinson buying his mom a house with his NIL money. I mean, that's what NIL's for. That's just a beautiful thing to see. A hardworking mom who presumably drives her kid to and from camps all across the state, all across the Southeast, when he's being recruited from his high school days, stays up late working to feed him, cooking dinner, just so much work that goes unnoticed or underappreciated. And then to see it all come back full circle is just a wonderful thing. So for those of you who don't like NIL, I understand exactly why. I can name all the reasons why you don't like it. I can probably rewrite off your scorecard. I get it. I completely understand. It's being abused. But hopefully this goes to show that there is still some good that comes from NIL. At its core, it is a good thing. The problem is just that unfortunately, as a society, once we get our hands on something, we decide that if some is good, more is better. We have a tendency to abuse it. But at its core, this is still a good thing, and there is still good that comes from it. And that's our show. That's our show today on the In All Kinds of Weather forecast. If you enjoyed our show, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. Please comment with your thoughts. And yeah, I mean, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So by all means, something I said you disagree with, comment why. Don't just spam it. Give me a reason why, so we can have a real conversation. But I want to hear that. I want to hear the dissenting thought processes from stuff that I've said, because as much as I may like to think so, I don't know everything. I'm open to hearing the other side of things. So, like I said about Billy Napier, we keep it respectful, but we keep it real. I would encourage those who have disagreements to do the exact same thing. Keep it respectful, but keep it real. Keep it real with us. Let me know. Let Chris know when he comes back. Let us know what we say, or if there's anything that we say that you want to have discussed in greater detail. So until next time, go Gators. In all kinds of weather, we will all stick together for FLORIDA.